Whew. Good afternoon. President Brody, Chairman Dortch, Vice President Matt Bowman, very distinguished guest, family and friends, and to my 100 brothers, congratulations. We did it. You did it. But there's so much more work to be done. Now, I kind of, went back and forth on how I would start this, but I was riding with my son Jarius yesterday, who's a senior in high school, a part of that next generation that Chairman Dortch and so many others discussed here today. And Jarius, we were talking about today's ceremony. He had just gotten his hair cut. I had thought about and reminisced on when I used to be able to get mine cut. And Jarius likes to crack jokes. Where is Jarius, by the way? I know he's out there somewhere. But Jarius challenged me in a joking way. He said, well, I dare you to start off your speech tomorrow saying, I have a dream. And he thought that was the funniest thing. And I laughed too. But as I thought about it, I said I did have a dream. And today is evident that that dream has been fulfilled. So I know we're not in church, but I'm going to take my time. I promise I'll be as brief as possible. But let me begin with a brief story. It was the spring of 1996 when a 16-year-old young black boy was headed to his first ever business meeting. As part of a mentoring program, he had found himself accompanying an educational software CEO to a sales pitch. He was promised a crisp $50 bill and a meal at Piccadilly Cafeteria. And I know you guys remember Piccadilly here in Gainesville. I think he was more excited about getting that dilly from America's favorite cafeteria. The boy didn't really know what to expect at the meeting. He was simply told to smile and not say a word, belly full and all. As they pulled up to the gates of the meeting venue, the young boy was blown away by what he saw. Some of the finest cars that money can buy, but more than that, he was surrounded by some of the most prestigious African-American men in the city of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Attorneys, doctors, politicians, community leaders, and educators. You see, that young man was used to having mentors like his brother and uncles, who were all great in their own right, but weren't quite yet on the level of some of these gentlemen. On that day, the young man began to see new possibilities. He began to imagine, to dream, if you will, new things that could be possible to him. The CEO did sell that software and closed the deal that day. But she also did something maybe less lucrative, but far more enduring. In allowing that young boy to accompany her, you see, she changed his life forever. That young boy went on to become a member of that same chapter, 100 chapter, in his native city of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, years later. In time, he would go on to co-found and lead that organization right here in the greater Gainesville region. Okay, spoiler alert, if you haven't guessed, that young black boy is me. I would like to thank Maureen Patterson for allowing me to accompany her that day, because I knew then that I wanted to be a part of, like our motto says, what they see is what they'll be. Those words are personal to me. I know the difference that it made in my own life. And that's why I am so heartened to see all of you here today. Today's successors to those successful men who inspired me on that fateful day to think bigger and to dream bigger. This entire COVID-19 episode just goes to prove the old adage that tough times don't last. But I'll tell you, tough people do. All of you have endured a lot this year, but continue to play an active role in this community. And continue to think about how you can give back and in ways that we can build things together. It certainly has not been an easy year. But now that there's finally a light we can see at the end of the tunnel as the vaccine continues to roll out, it's a fitting time to reflect on the kind of community we want to build together. One in which the full force of the next pandemic doesn't fall disproportionately on Black communities and people of color. One in which we take action early on to prevent the persistent inequalities and disparities that continue to plague our communities. You see, we've learned a lot this year. We've learned how to be resilient. We've learned about rolling with the unexpected. We've learned about making the most of a rough hand. But my message today to all of you is simple and applies now more than ever. It's yes, the Black man can. For me, that was the lesson in the story for 2020. As we endured a pandemic, as our country was rocked by the long overdue racial and social reckoning in the wakes of the death of our brother George Floyd and our sister Breonna Taylor, along with far too many other names to list. As our democracy was pushed to this breaking point, and our community turned out in record numbers and forever dismissed the notion that our community can be ridiculed, that our communities can be marginalized, ignored, or kept from the polls. Too many civic so-called leaders in America, and y'all know who I'm talking about, would rather think of creative new ways to keep Black men from voting than actually listening to them and working with them to develop policies and solutions to improve their quality of life. Through all of these challenges, you kept it moving. You kept moving forward. I know you're here today carving out time from your busy schedules because you know that you represent one more link in a long tradition. We all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. That's why we can't take it for granted today that an African-American woman can hold the title of Vice President of the United States. And not think it's anything extraordinary until we really stop and pause and think about just how far we have all come. And speaking of standing on shoulders, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our dear beloved brother Earl Young, the original founder and president of the 100 Black Men of Greater Gainesville. As mentioned earlier, founded in 1996. Ironically, the same year I first had my introduction to the 100, in which I spoke of earlier. I never had a chance to meet Earl, as he passed away prior to my family and I relocating to Gainesville. However, I know that he is smiling down on all of us today. Not only for continuing his legacy, no, but more importantly, for carrying on the charge of investment in our Black boys and the entire Black community here in Gainesville, Florida. Yes, the Black man can. When I think of the Black man, I think of specific individuals who modeled to me the full range of what I could aspire to. People like my grandfather. He was born in 1915, and let me tell you, no easy time for men of color. But despite his circumstances, he did not allow his station in life to deter him from achieving the American dream. My grandfather lived all of his dreams: home ownership, a family family life, a distinguished military career, and he did it all without a high school diploma or a college degree. Doors that were largely shut to him because of the prejudices of that time. But that door was kicked in a bit more to that next generation of black men and black women. Like my mother, and I know she's watching. She was the first in her family to earn a college degree, and she went on to live her dream and have a career as an educator for special needs children. And she raised 2 African American men, my brother and I, to be resilient and ready for life's challenges. You see, I was lucky. I grew up in an environment in which everyone in my life pushed me to have high expectations for myself. I had my grandfather, I had my mother, I had my brother and sister who are here today from Louisiana. And let me tell you, my brother went to LSU. Y'all don't hold that against him. I know he's in here hollering, "Go Tigers." Go Tigers. But I had my brother and sister to emulate in their examples of not settling for anything less than their very best. It is because of their example that I have learned to not be afraid of new challenges. And I know you have developed that same fearlessness because of the mentors and role models in all of your lives. You know, something has fundamentally shifted in our culture. And this year was a breaking point. Much of it could have to do with the technology. You know, with the cell phone in every pocket, it's harder and harder for blatant racism and oppression to just be swept under the rug. The civil rights movement became real for many Americans only when they saw the images of oppression on television, when they saw police dogs attacking young black men throughout the South in places like Selma and Birmingham. But what has changed today is that we won't allow our outrage to be drowned out by the media. We all have a voice, and we can all take a stand against bigotry and racism, not only in individual hearts, but in our institutions and our power structures. Just being a part of this organization is asking a lot of all of you. You need to make sacrifices to take part in this community, on top of your careers, on top of your family lives. We have leaders of major organizations amongst all of you. We have pillars of our community. I get it. You're busy. We're all busy. And on top of everything you have happening in your lives, you guys have all stepped up to plant a seed in another young man's life. What they see is what they'll be. As mentors, you play a critical component in at least one of the 6 key areas in our organization's framework that Tommy mentioned earlier: education, economic empowerment, health and wellness, leadership development, community empowerment, and of course, my favorite that I saved for last, but most important, mentoring. We know there are so many factors that influence a young person's perspective and view of themselves. We can't shield them from the world or the media. We can't be everywhere. But when we are fully present in their lives, when we are there as someone they can look up to and emulate, we can model a path forward for a productive, healthy, and satisfying journey through life. What they see is what they'll be. In the years ahead, we'll stay laser focused on the priorities laid out in the national organization's strategic plan, looking ahead through 2025. Our focus will be on maintaining and enhancing the talent pool that undergirds the organization, collaborating closely with fellow chapters and partners across the nation, linking our knowledge to the needs of the communities we serve and staying focused on our core mission, mentoring Black boys and young men. I'll never forget the difference that even a small amount of attention from a mentor made in my own life. And I know that the young men you work with will never forget how you made them feel. Scripture tells us, to whom much is given, much is required. We are part of what MLK called the beloved community. It depends on our ability to see our common humanity and to lift each other up, not tear each other down. I'm so grateful to each of you who have joined us on this journey. We're proud of each of you, and we are here to support you on the journey ahead. Thank you very much.